What's up, guys? So we've just had the 3v3 YCS in Brazil. We're about to have YCS Vancouver this weekend. So what's the meta saying? Well, start off with Ignista. Ignista's going to be, I'd say, somewhere bottom of rogue / non-meta. It has a couple of advantages. We're seeing Kaijus and stuff come out of the format a bit. People are playing Kurokara and they're not really playing Kaijus. Ignista doesn't care about that. It is still a good deck. I also am one of the few people who thinks that Ignista is actually quite good in a hand trap format just because it has so many one-card combos and can play a lot of hand traps itself. So in the simplified game state, it's really hard to be against a deck like Ignista, which will eventually reach its game plan. The biggest problem is Kashtira though. So low rogue, but if Kashtira goes, has a chance. Branded, I'm actually going to say is probably high tier 2, low tier 1.5. The problem with Branded is Chimera, which is better than I thought it was, I'll give it credit. Chimera is starting to come up, which means people are siding cards to hate Branded, and Branded was already getting kind of collaterally destroyed by cards like Ash, by cards like Retaliating Sea, D-Shifter, and then now people are going to have those D barriers in as well for Retaliating Sea, etc, which is just a problem. Branded does not like being the best deck. Look, I think this Branded Bystial Synchro deck is non-meta. That's my honest opinion. Sorry, Nesh, I'm not trying to hate on you. I think that deck is trash. Every time I see it, it's absolutely terrible. It might just be a really high skill cap deck, and I've never seen anyone perform with it, but that's the same difference, right? It's the same reason that I don't think Rika's great, but I put Rika's like a tier 1.5, because in fact, I'll just do it now. I would say Rika's like the opposite, where I don't think Rika's that good a deck, but people don't respect Rika, and if you don't respect Rika, it punishes you. So it ends up being tier 1.5 in terms of performance. So actually, I'll tell you high tier 2 anyway. But yeah, so that Branded Synchro deck, I don't know, I think it's not, I think it's trash. Chimera, look, in my opinion, initially, I found this deck to be a weaker version of Branded, but I think this deck has a really big advantage that's similar to Vanquish Soul. The deck itself, I don't think is great. I think the engine is quite pathetic, but it draws a lot of cards. And when you draw a lot of cards, you draw into busted side cards, and right now, side cards are cracked. If you can take advantage of side cards, which this deck can and Branded can't, you're a good deck. And because of that, I think it puts it in tier 1.5, just how it is. So not a good deck, but it's a deck that can abuse stables, a bit like Sky Striker, for example. Dark World, somewhere in low rogue. Dark World and Drytron, same thing. Dark World's objectively better right now, but same problem. Shifter, Droll, Bystials, all of this stuff sucks. If you don't have those, if you're not playing hand traps, and this is one thing you need to be careful of, especially now that people have seen Unchained win and they might try and copy pack and play no hand traps. If you have no hand traps, these decks will FTK you, and like not just give you FTK, like Dark World, you'll have no cards in hand. But if you do have hand traps, these decks can get stunned. D-Link, I'm going to say is like high, okay, let's say low tier 1.5. Yeah, low tier 1.5. The thing about D-Link is it's a good deck, but I think it's very well understood now. People are just more and more starting to understand how to deal with it, what to do against it. And then also Bystials. The cards that make them so good are also cards that are just very good against them. And then also, it gets collaterally hit by Nibiru, it gets collaterally hit by Droll, which sucks. Kashtira is in the format, which sucks. I thought this deck was amazing last format. I still think it's very good. I still think it's tier 1.5. But I think it will struggle in this mid-range format with a lot of counter cards. And so that's why it's there. Exosister, high tier rogue. It's a good deck. It's not a bad deck. The main issue of Exosister is just going to be consistency, and when you have weak main deck monsters, that's always a bad thing. Your main deck monsters need to be very high value, and outside of Martha, all the main deck monsters are trash, so it's a bit of a shame. Flunder, low tier 2, high tier rogue. It's a good deck, it does Flunder stuff, it's just not unfair anymore, which is unfortunately the problem. It's got Featherstorm, hasn't got Barrier, which is a shame. Hero is probably the best rogue deck in my opinion. I think Hero is a very good deck, I think the new support is great. I think the biggest issue with Heroes is going to be that it can't put up a negate, which holds it back a lot of the time. And then even ignoring the fact that it can't put up a negate, its going first balls are actually surprisingly easy to crack. A lot of the times it's going to have that Tri-Brigade Revolt card, it's going to have DPE and things like that. It might have Plasma, but a lot of times Book of Eclipse wipe the whole board, or evenly wipe the whole board, things like that, which links to the first thing of not having a negate. But yeah, that's the biggest problem with Heroes. Infernoble, I'm also actually going to demote Infernoble to Rogue. I think Infernoble should be a good deck, but it can't go second at all. It really, really struggles to go second. Even going first, its boards are good, but its boards do kind of hard lose to a lot of cards. Like, if you have things like Droplets, Dark Ruler, their board can be completely waxed. And so, while I think a good pilot can perform well on this deck, I don't think I wouldn't put it as tier 1, 1.5, or tier 2, for example. Like, if I compared Infernoble to every deck above it, I don't think it has a chance. Kashtira, tier 1, I think the deck is amazing. It's Kashtira, not much to say about that. Labyrinth, I'm going to say Labyrinth is still tier 1 as well. I think the thing about Labyrinth is that it's a deck that in the context of a big tournament, you will always do well with trap decks, almost always, because most people won't play trap decks. That's simply, even when Labyrinth was really, really popular about a month or two ago, you'd rarely have a tournament where you would have like 30% of people on a trap deck. It just doesn't happen. And so people will side less with trap decks, which means you a lot of the time have a huge advantage going into game one. Game one, you flip skill drain. Some people, like me, we don't even have back row outs in our main deck. And even if we do, we don't have 3. So Labyrinth has that going for it, and then moving past that, even though people are getting better at playing against Labyrinth, it's still a hard deck to beat. The furniture game is really hard. Big Welcome's nuts, Eradicator's nuts. It's got a lot of unfair win buttons. I had a mate of mine playing Shifter in Labyrinth. I don't know if that was a thing before, but yeah, it can even play Shifter if it wants to, because it can play around it. I mean, the deck is just really, really good, really, really unfair, and as a trap deck, and a fast trap deck, it's very well positioned, so I definitely think it's a tier 1 deck. I think Castor is a little bit better, but yeah. Mannadium... yeah, I think Mannadium is, I don't know, somewhere there. I don't know. I don't even want to put it here, because the thing about Mannadium, I'm going to put it down, and this is why. I have not seen results. I've maybe seen like one top at most, but I haven't seen results with it. I think if I'm not seeing results, then as good as it might be, I think it's not worth even considering. So Mannadium, it's got a lot of unfair things it can do turn 1, but everyone's playing hand traps, everyone's playing around it. You're just not resolving that combo, and then the deck will brick sometimes as well, which is just a problem. Marincess is a good Cyberse deck. However, the issue Marincess has always really had is that it's not aggressive enough. Its board turn 1 is not usually oppressive. Sometimes it can't even kill you on the crackback because the deck's just not good at that. It has got Zelantis, but that's not enough a lot of the time. So while I do think Marincess is a good Cyberse deck, and right now it's probably the best Cyberse deck, to be fair. I don't know. Actually, I haven't got Salad here, but I will talk about Salad as well. So it's like, yeah, between Salad and Marincess for the best Cyberse deck, I think just the fact that it can't be as aggressive as it would like to be holds it back, and so that's why it's somewhere here. And if we were to talk about Salamangreat as well, I think Salamangreat is probably a little bit better than Marincess, a little bit worse. Yeah, a little bit better than Marincess, but then I don't think I'd say Salad is better than Exosister, for example, because Exosister can play Shifter. So yeah, somewhere here. All the Cyberse decks are down here. Mathmech is the same thing. They never really recovered after losing Circular, and they already have the Bestial problem as well. Pearly is tier 1 or 1.5. Like, I think there's an argument for either, to be honest. What I would say as well is that, and this is going to be punishment for people who don't actually watch the video and listen to my explanation, we're in a very flat format right now. The gap between tier 1 and tier 1.5 is so small. The gap between 1.5 and 2 isn't that big either. And so anything up here is a pretty good deck. They're all arguably, like, there's arguments for all of them. All of the ones in tier 1, so there's arguments for all of them to potentially be in tier 1.5 apart from Kashtira. So I'm saying Pearly is like tier 1. You could say it's tier 1.5. The point is it's a good deck. It's going to do well. Noir is a great card. Sleepy is a great card. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, Rescue Ace, love this deck so much, but look, my genuine opinion is that it is a tier 2 deck. I think it's a very, very good deck. I think it's a very skill-intensive deck, but it does not have an unfair win condition, which is what holds it back, and it is not consistent. It's semi-consistent if you, like, do some jank with it, but then you have to sacrifice utility, and yeah, I think Rescue Ace is a great deck. I really love it. That's all I play on my channel now, guys, but I honestly do think it's a tier 2 deck. I don't think it's amazing. Runic is weird. I don't know. I think right now in this format, you do need to be able to play hand traps. Like, it's important, and so I think because Runic can't play a lot, that does hold it back. When it goes first, it's nice, but even going first against some of these decks, it just doesn't matter. They can play through your 1 or 2 Runic negates and just, like, dodge your effects and stuff. So, like, even Rescue Ace I thought was a bad matchup into Runic, and then I started realizing that a lot of times I can dodge the effects of Emergency and things like that, and they've only got, like, 1 negate. Sprite, I actually think it's still a very good deck. I would say Sprite is probably right at the bottom of tier 2. So you could probably put Sprite right at the bottom of tier 1.5. You could probably put it at the top of tier 2, but I think Sprite is still a very good deck as itself, just because it can play a lot of hand traps, can play through hand traps well, can play through wall breakers, you can play it blind second, like, it's got a lot of things going for it. I do like that deck a lot. Synchron is the same thing as Mannadium, nothing really to say. Tearlaments is a deck that is, look, Tearlaments is here. It's top of Rogue as well, but Tearlaments just needs, like, the slightest shift in the meta, and I think it could be a tier 1.5 deck. Like, it is still very, very good. A lot of cards come out. It plays well things like Revolution Synchron, But while a deck like Kashtira exists, and to an extent Labyrinth, while these two decks exist, it does hold it back a lot. As soon as we lose Kashtira from the format, I think Tear Limits is going to be amazing, and that will probably make Exosister stronger as well. Unchained, unfortunately, I'm also going to put as tier 1. The problem with Unchained is, I don't think Unchained is amazing, but I think Unchained is another Rika kind of deck where people haven't respected it and haven't bothered to learn it. If you take the time and you know the Unchained matchup, then it becomes a relatively easy deck to read, because most of their combos are 2-card combos, 2.5-card combos, so you know what they have in their hand, you know what they're doing, and so you can interrupt them at the correct spots. But chances are you're not playing hand traps that are good against them, because they're better against most of the hand traps that are in the format right now. So your Imperm, your Veiler, your Droll, this isn't going to do a lot. Nib is okay if you have a second hand trap, but if you don't, it's not amazing. And sometimes it's not enough, because they do sometimes have these 2, 3, 4-card combos that just let them play around Nib. And then also, the Unchained has a, probably out of all of these decks, maybe except for Kashtira in my opinion, Kashtira and Chimera are probably the two closest after Unchained that can break boards. Unchained break boards like no man's business, and they main deck Thrust as well. They main deck Thrust, they main deck Talents. So it's like, when Unchained is going second, even with no hand traps, they can crack your board. It is not difficult for them off 1 or 2 cards, which gives them a real edge, because it means that this is a deck that, even if it's not playing hand traps, even if it loses dice roll, they can feel confident that they're still in a good position. Most other decks can't do this. Normal Summon Airlifter is not that good into a board full of monsters. And so all of this put together, and also the destruction effects in the format, I think does give Unchained an edge, where I think it's good against, Unchained is good against the staples as opposed to the decks themselves, and that's what's given it a really big edge, and then people aren't understanding the deck as well. Vanquish Soul, bottom of tier 2, I think it's a deck that abuses staples, but we've just discovered a deck that abuses staples way better in Chimera, so that's why I think that, combined with the fact that Kashtira isn't as popular, and Vanquish Soul had a good matchup into them, holds it back. And so all of that together, I'd say, yeah, bottom of tier 2, not a bad deck. And lastly, Virtual World. Virtual World is somewhere in non-meta. I saw a guy, so there's a guy on DB called Cooperate or something, one-tricking it, which gave me interest, and I was like, is the deck actually better? And some of the cards out, the Revolution Synchron, things like that, are nice for Virtual World. But fundamentally, 2 things hold it back. Kashtira completely destroys Virtual World, because you can't even activate the monsters if a Rise Heart or Shifter is in play. And then also on top of that, Virtual World simply will always be too bricky. If they ever get more Virtual World names or something, maybe it'll have a chance, but the deck is just too bricky, and that holds it back so much, especially now that you can't replay Golden Lord, and you can't replay, what's the other one called? You can't play Golden Lord and Droplets anymore, again, because of Kashtira, so that holds back Virtual World a lot. But guys, that is my September 2023 tier list. Like I said, I think we're in a very, very flat format right now. I think everything up here is amazing and can consistently top. Some of the stuff here will probably top as well, but I think the winners of the YCS and things like that will be one of these decks up here. Probably, if I was to say what are the 3 decks that I can see winning the YCS the most, it would probably be Kashtira. I wouldn't actually say Unchained. It would probably be Kashtira, after that Labyrinth, after that maybe Chimera, just because of the ability for Chimera to abuse side cards. I think these would be my 3 choices for the winners, because they've got the best matchups against everything else in the top tier. But outside of that, I mean, they're all good picks. The other thing though is that everything in Rogue and non-meta, I think the format is very flat up here, but then the gap between tier 2 and Rogue right now is huge. I think all of these decks are just way better than these decks down here. And so most of the decks in Rogue, I just don't think they're worth paying even to feel good. Salad is here as well. If there's a deck I didn't talk about, tell me. I probably discluded that. I've removed a lot of decks because I'm tired of telling you guys that Savage Dragons are trash. So yeah, whatever. But I'll talk to you guys soon. I'll catch you in a bit. Peace.